Hello folks, welcome to our channel, Phyniks Media. Today we will be walking through one of the best movies of Buster Keaton, The General. Released in 1926. Let's begin.
The Western and Atlantic Flyer, being pushed by the train general, speeds into Marietta, Georgia, in the spring of 1861. The engineer, Johnnie Gray, Buster Keaton, gets down to greasing around and is watched by two admiring youngsters. He has two loves in his life, his engine and his girlfriend, Annabelle. He gives Annabelle a picture of himself standing in front of his engine. When Annabelle's brother comes, he announces that war has begun. He goes to sign up with their father and Annabelle expects Johnnie to enlist.
To be first in line, Johnnie takes a shortcut and climbs the counter. He does not hear that he is more important to the South as an engineer, thus he is confused as to why he is turned down. He tries to sign up 2 more times, but is turned away. Annabelle's father and brother invite him to join the line, but he refuses. They consider him a disgrace and inform Annabelle that he never stood in line. He sits dejectedly on the side rod of his engine. Annabelle informs him that she will not speak to him until he is in uniform. The engine is moved by an engine hostler, while Johnnie remains seated on the side rod. He is unaware until the locomotive enters the engine house. 1 year later, in Chattanooga, General Thatcher and his best spy, Captain Anderson, devise a plan to seize a train at Big Shanty and drive it north, burning bridges to cut the supply line to the Confederate force that threatens Chattanooga. Annabelle joins Johnnie's train in Marietta on her way to see her injured father. When the train arrives in Big Shanty for breakfast, Anderson and his men depart on the opposite side of the tracks from the station. The workers uncouple the boxcars from the coaches, climb on board, and start the engine. They find Annabelle and must take her. When Johnnie discovers it, he quickly runs behind the train to retrieve it. Annabelle's hands are tied by the spies. They stop to cut the telegraph wires. Johnnie stops at a handcar shed, and he gets the handcar going. The spies cut down a rail and jam stones into the guardrail. Johnnie is thrown from the handcar, which crashes off the track and down an embankment. The general sneaks by Kingston. Johnnie notices a bicycle and jumps on it, but it doesn't perform properly on the bumpy roadbed. Johnnie dashes into Kingston and shouts for help. Soldiers pop onto the flat car, trailing this train named Texas. To leave the rest of the train, Johnnie pulls the pin behind the flat car, but the flat car is not attached to the engine, and when he speeds away, he does not notice the flat car full of soldiers is left behind. By the time he notices, he is alone. Captain Anderson will not fight because he believes they are outnumbered. Johnnie loads the cannon with the entire canister of powder. His foot gets entangled in the coupling bar and dislodges it as he rushes back to the cab. When he eventually gets his foot unstuck, the bar falls down and bangs against the cross ties, lowering the mortar until it points directly at Johnnie, who is now caught in a chain loop. He manages to break free and scramble all the way to the cowcatcher. The two trains reach an S-curve and are in such good positions when the mortar fires that the shot misses the Texas and explodes just behind it. The spies abandon the rear boxcar in Johnnie's path. He pushes it onto a passing siding and continues. He's so preoccupied with feeding the fire that he doesn't notice the boxcar rolling to the end of the siding and back onto the main track. He had no idea how the boxcar arrived in front of him again. The spies dump wood across the rails from the surviving boxcar. While seeking for a cloth to repair a leaking valve, Johnnie fails to notice when the boxcar collides with one of the timbers and is derailed out of the way. He has no idea why the boxcar has vanished. He can now see the timbers on the track. He slows the engine and sprints ahead to pick up the first one. However, he stumbles and falls back onto the moving cowcatcher, still holding the timber. He utilizes it with skillful timing to get the next one out of the way. Johnnie is so preoccupied with chopping wood on the tender that he fails to observe the Confederate troops retreating. Captain Anderson removes his Confederate uniform as the Union Army approaches. When Johnnie discovers the Union soldiers, he crouches on the cab's floor. The general travels beneath a trestle and loops around to stop on the trestle above. When Johnnie passes below, Captain Anderson takes a good look and remarks, "There is just one man on that engine." Johnnie comes to a halt and exits the vehicle to hide in the woods, and it starts to rain. When it gets dark, Johnnie climbs through a house window and steals food from the dining table. When several Union officers enter, he hides beneath it and hears them discussing getting supply trains across the Rock River Bridge so the Army may strike the Confederates the next day. Officers depart. Johnnie knocks out a sentry with a log, borrows his uniform, and gets into Annabelle's room through the window. He leads her through the window and into the wilderness. They decide they should rest in the forest until dawn. The next morning, Johnnie notices his train is named General. He stuffs Annabelle inside an enormous bag. He joins a line of soldiers loading the boxcar behind the general. He stands where Annabelle can reach to uncouple it from the rest of the train, then places her in the boxcar as a bag of supplies. He joins the line, loads firewood, knocks out the officer in the cab, and starts the engine, heading south. Johnnie stops outside of town, and he pulls away. The pole and wire are removed, and the telegraph line is cut. Meanwhile, the enemy starts chasing with the Texas and another engine. They have to stop to get the telegraph pole out of the way. Johnnie knocks down the entire back wall of the boxcar. The enemies must stop once again to clean it from the track. He slows them down by tossing all of the freight onto the track out the back door. The Union officer is just recovering consciousness in the cab. Just in time, Johnnie returns, knocks him out with a well-aimed log, and steals his pistol. Annabelle fuels the fire. When she sees a wood with a large hole in it, she rejects it and throws it out of the cab. Johnnie is speechless. Annabelle sweeps the cab while Johnnie tosses the broom. Annabelle feeds the fire with kindling, and Johnnie takes a tiny piece and hands it to her. She hurls it into the firebox. He shakes her. The enemies catch up and couple to the back of the boxcar. Johnnie decouples it at the front end. Johnnie fastens the tender and certain switch locations using a chain. He starts the engine with Annabelle, and the chain deforms the switch points. But Annabelle can't stop the engine. Johnnie hurries downhill to meet her where the train passes below, but she reverses the train, forcing him to struggle back up the hill. They meet the enemies at the damaged switch, where the two enemy trains collide again, allowing Johnnie and Annabelle to flee. Johnnie stops in the middle of the old, unstable, wooden Rock River Bridge of Doom and piles firewood on it to burn it. Meanwhile, the enemies can't figure out how to fix the switch so they can continue the chase, and a Union army is approaching at the bridge. Johnnie pours kerosene from the headlamp onto the firewood. Annabelle knocks the burning fence rail off the tender, trapping Johnnie in the middle of the bridge on the other side of the flames. He jumps over the fire just as Annabelle moves the engine ahead, making Johnnie fall into the river and swim back to the engine. Johnnie changes his uniform. They arrive in Marietta, and Johnnie rushes to the division headquarters to inform them of the attack. The general takes the soldiers out of town, leaving Johnnie alone in the deserted street. He finds a sword belt and a handgun, buckles them on, and follows the soldiers. The enemies fix the track and move toward the Rock River Bridge at the same time as the Union Army arrived. The Texas proceeds onto the bridge to chase them until the bridge fails and it plunges down to the river. The Confederates surprise the Union troops, and the fighting begins. He is standing near a cannon, where a sharpshooter is picking off artillerymen. Finally, Johnnie's broken sword is effective. At his commanding swing, the blade comes off again and spears the sharpshooter. Johnnie tries firing the unmanned cannon. The shot lands in the river, blowing a dam. The flood of water traps the enemy infantry in the river, forcing them to flee. Johnnie fires another shot, derailing the last car and stopping the retreating supply train. The victorious army marches back into town, Johnnie leading the way. He enters the vehicle to discover the forgotten enemy officer just waking up. He leads him to division headquarters and hands over the enemy's surrendered sword to the officer. Following a brief explanation, the general hands him an officer's coat and enlists him as a lieutenant. At this point, Annabelle and Johnnie are together.
Sign off. Please subscribe and stay tuned for more movie recaps, and thanks for watching.